All right, welcome to the Big Douglas Show on a Friday. This is an interesting way we'll do things today. We're going to start out doing a little business side of things with the news about Dan Snyder, and then stay afterwards when we'll do the normal preview Friday portion of the show. To get to that, we brought in from Front Office Sports AJ Perez today. AJ, thank you so much for coming on and doing this with us.
No problem. Happy to be back.
Stuart, always glad to have you on the show. I brought you on because I wanted to start out a little bit from the fan perspective and what all this kind of means. Stuart is a longtime fan, as we both are, but he has gone more the road of I'll believe it when I see it. I still remain cautiously optimistic. I believe a little bit more than he does, if that's fair. AJ, I know you're from the area. Are you a fan of the team? How has all this kind of affected your fandom, and how has covering the business side of things affected your fandom?
Well, I was only a fan of the team when I was in sixth grade because I grew up in California, and my teacher wouldn't give us homework if the Commanders, were known by another team back then, won the week before. So and I was in school and I just missed out on the Super Bowl in '88. That for that season. The Doug Williams season. So I was a year after that. So they weren't as successful the next year. So I just had to do a little more homework. But I guess you could consider me a fan. I grew up more of a Rams fan until they moved to St. Louis. But yeah, I mean, I've lived here for over 16 years. I know I'm actually at my gym, which is about 5 minutes from the team headquarters here in Ashburn. So it's we just, there's a lot of sense of there are a lot of people who are cautiously optimistic because it's, because we still don't know for sure what's going to happen. Well, I don't know if it'll be. People I talk to, are almost. I haven't heard any of my sources say that a partial sale will happen, but there's still a long way to go.
Stuart, has any of this moved the needle for you?
I mean, in the sense that this is the closest that we've ever gotten to a legitimate shot, but golly. I mean, it was 2-3 weeks ago with another famed I'll never do it. First, of course, it was I'll never change the name. We changed the name, but it was 3 weeks ago, right? We will not sell the team.
2.5 weeks, yeah.
I mean, in no uncertain terms, it was very clear. So, of course, that means that just like the name, yes, it's possible. And here we are. But, yeah, I'll believe when I see it. I'm just, yeah.
The only thing I'll say, though, is the statement released, whatever it was, 2 days ago now, by the team, did not have the emphatic, go take a hike line at the end, we're never selling, which I think is fairly big. No, AJ? Is that what you take from that?
I mean, most of these statements, and we can go back to the Angels, you can go back to the Nats, they're those are the most recent teams to sell or go on the market. The ownership in charge never says we're selling. They're going to say exploring business opportunities, exploring, potential business partners or something like that. This is, the biggest sign is hiring a bank or hiring a banker. There's firms out there that just do sports, major sports transactions. They didn't go with one. He went with one that I'm still trying to figure out. I understand why, but a lot of people around the NFL are still questioning why Bank of America is handling it.
Did Bank of America handle the Suns transaction?
They handled, I think I was looking into the Tepper one. So they handled the Carolina Panthers.
The Carolina Panthers.
And some people in NFL are just, I've had team execs were wondering why them? And the problem is I don't know what the issues with why there were issues with the Panthers, because that progressed fairly quickly. It took 4 or 5 months between Richardson saying, basically, bowing out because of all the allegations of workplace allegations and the use of a racial slur. He decided to sell. And within 5 months, the Tepper was approved. I just don't know exactly what with that process the NFL or the NFL team executives are questioning it. I'm still working on that.
Now, if he was to do just a minority stake, so would he also need a bank? I literally don't know. Would this still be needed?
You would still need someone to facilitate it, because we're still even a minority stake, if it's 40%, it's gonna, yeah, if he sold it for around $900 million last year, it's probably gonna be worth more. But will it? It could be a major discount. So the only way I see a minority stake happening, which is kind of doesn't make it would not. I don't. First of all, you have to be a billionaire and you'd be subordinate to Dan Snyder. Would a billionaire who's used to doing things his or her own way be subordinate? And would Snyder, and there's Weiss, and the other part of it is maybe if they had a pathway to ownership, but there's that, if he's going to sell 5 years from now, and there's that, why not? There's really, it's Snyder is the main issue when it comes to the inability for a stadium. It's there. I know what Jerry Jones said today. A minority owner is not going to fix that. I don't care who it is. There's not going to be. You need somebody at the top. You need someone that fans can have faith in. You need someone that politicians, if you're going to get public money, to have faith in. There's Snyder being on top with selling a 30 to 40% stake or something is not going to solve anything.
So you do not believe that this is minority shares we're talking about to raise funding to pay for a new stadium? You do not believe.
I mean that could be the case, but it would just who is he going to find to do that? That's the whole part of it, and it's not, and they would have really very little say on the team, and minority ownership around pro sports. You don't have much of a say. We saw that go down with Shar, and the others. Frederick, Smith, and who am I missing? I'm missing. All right, Shar, Smith, and I'm blanking on the third name. So, but anyway, they were trying to get out, and they found two guys, and they're actually two of the people I just put out there who were looking to buy the 40%, who now are possibly in the running for buying the team, along with Bezos and some other names that are out there. So I just don't. He's never, and I broke the story about Bezos being interested on the minority partner part of it. But I think even back then, this is 2 years ago, before the first investigation dropped, that was still too much for Bezos to get into the team. So, and it's gotten a lot worse since.
I guess the argument there would be there's only 32 of them, and some billionaire somewhere would still be interested in getting into the club. I think it's easy to suggest that Dan Snyder's so toxic that nobody would want to do business with him. But if it's your only way to get into the club, I still think he probably could have found somebody to do it. AJ, I've long said for a year now at least, it can't be fun owning the Commanders for Dan Snyder, which sounds incredible. I mean, here is a guy that grew up rooting for the team, makes it big, buys the hometown team, and they're getting booed. Two things: it can't be fun to be the owner of the team right now. And how much do you think when Tanya Snyder got booed at the game 2 weeks ago, did this really pivot, or did Dan Snyder just get Sarvered out of here by the other owners saying, "Listen, pal, you got to go now"?
It's a combination of so many things. I think that incident. I want to say incident. The fans booing when Tanya was on the video board against the Packers, that probably played a role, according to my sources, who just were. It was, I don't know, which is shocking to me. You're right. I live here. I know. I'm on social media. I see what people say. I listen to talk radio. I know what the callers and the hosts say. Why would that shock Tanya? Was one thing, because obviously she's and she's been to a couple owners meetings now in person, and she's kind of taking the lead there for her husband. But did she not know how much these fans are upset, and how she could just look around the stadium, the 20,000 fewer seats than 20 years ago. Yeah. I mean, does she not see that? I mean, that's what that doesn't. I think that was a factor, but it's still kind of, which is still shocking to me. But yeah, the owners, we saw the SBJ report, and I've heard the same thing about the owners. We've heard this for months, pushing him to sell. I still, they want that part of it because they don't want to have to force them out, just because if they could get 24 votes, but then what will Snyder do next? That will he file a lawsuit? Will he, which is he's used the court system for the last couple of years in many ways, and going back beyond that. I mean, there was a court fight before he was approved as owner in 1999. I mean, and the owner still approved him. So it's like, so that, you know, going back to his history as an owner, even a few months before he became an owner, you know, he uses the court system, and now we have an investigation at the Department of Justice, and also that's now the 6th investigation ongoing apparently. So there's just so much out there that, you know, there's one of those investigations popping with something with either final findings from the oversight committee, or, you know, potential, you know, what we saw in DC, the DC Attorney General and the two other attorneys general in Maryland and Virginia are investigating. And then you have the Mary Jo White investigation. There's so much out there that there's just, along with the pressure of the owners, this is all part of it.
Does Dan have a fiduciary responsibility to the other owners to get as much money for the team as possible? I say that, I'm sure you know where I'm going here.
Yeah.
Bezos being the lead candidate in most people's minds, we know the long-standing feud between Dan and the Post. Can he just say no to Bezos even if the money is higher? Does he owe it to the other owners to get top dollar?
No, and I posed that question to a few people around the NFL, including whether they would reject, you know, a good candidate, somebody like some of the other names that are out there. You know, a billionaire who has deep pockets, who has a history. Some of the owners have, you know, like the Sixers and Dodgers co-owners are in the mix. You know, there's a track record there. So as long as that other person doesn't you know, raise concerns among the other NFL owners, they could, you know, they would likely approve somebody who, you know, because it's Snyder's money to lose. It's not the NFL. The NFL, you know, will have to approve it through the finance committee first, and then 24 owners. But this is all on Snyder. He's going to make or lose money by, you know, won't lose money. He'll make less money. Yeah. But it's like, you know, that's just, and the people I talk to who dealt with Snyder and know, you know, have been around him for years, just don't expect him to leave money on the table, no matter if it is Bezos and his issues with the Washington Post. And now that Washington Post has kind of been usurped by the ESPN expose. So as long as I guess Mickey Mouse doesn't try to buy the team, that's you know, that's another thing.
What does the new owner of the team get? I guess I'm getting next to the evaluation of the club, and I don't know. I was thinking it would be around $8 million once you include all the acreage that I think 75 acres around the current facility, and then everything out in Ashburn. Do you know? I mean, what does the new owner get when he buys the Commanders?
Yeah, beyond the land, and the team, they're also buying into what the team was decades ago. They're buying into what those RFK days. They're buying into the Super Bowls. They want to get back there. And the NFL, I wrote a feature about a month ago about how far this team has fallen. This was a top 3 NFL franchise. They were in the top 1, 2, or 3 almost every season in attendance. They were in the top 5 for years for local TV ratings. And you know that there are other issues that obviously the stadium was awful that he inherited. You know, even he was only 2 years old when he got there. Or 2 or 3 years old when he bought the teams. But it was outdated and Snyder had to put a lot of money into it just to comply with ADA regulations and other things. There were a lot of amenities that stadium didn't have to meet, even, you know, to you know, be a modern NFL stadium. That was 20 something years ago. So that's one thing. But you're getting, you know, and you're also getting a path to bringing the team back to DC if it's the right owner, and if it's the deep enough pockets to either, you know, it's always that $3 billion dome stadium. They want to put it in somewhere in Northern Virginia, likely Dumfries, Woodbridge area. You know, that was supposed to be a big entertainment complex. They'll have a concert hall and all these other amenities. You can't do that at RFK. So you're going to kind of forego that. But to get back to what the team was, you know, and there's going to be a lot of issues, I think a lot of political will, because, you know, that land is basically controlled by Congress since it's National Park Service land. And they have to, you know, there's been a representative, Norton has tried for the last few years to get that transfer to DC, where they have more of a say. But, you know, the DC government, you know, the DC right now, the rules are in place where you can't, if it does become DC land, you know, they can't publicly finance. You know, they're not going to get money for it. So it could end up you're spending a couple $1 million for a stadium there, whether it's open air or a dome, the dome would be much more likely to lure the NFL here for the Super Bowl, which is something that I think a lot of that Snyder wants, I guess, and everything else. So.
Yeah, you have to have a dome to host a Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there's only been one time, and I covered that one. That was a very cold game at the Meadowlands there. It was that was a one time. That was the only time. That's over in recent years that's been maybe ever at a cold weather outdoor stadium.
Do you what are we know about Bezos and Jay-Z? What are some of the other names we should be looking out for potential buyers?
I'm gonna butcher some names. Well, there, I saw Elon Musk's name out there. I was like, oh geez. There's be a lot of names. Byron Allen is out there. None of the people I talk to think that it's going to take when you're talking about a majority ownership of an NFL team that requires 30% cash,
right?
And that's if it goes for $7 billion, that's well over $2 billion. Well over, it's like 2 point, I don't know, do the exact math, but it's over $2 billion cash you have to have. That takes so many people out of it, and a lot of minorities included. There's only one non-white owner right now, majority owner, and that's Khan down with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, but some of the other names, that includes the ones I mentioned before. I'm going to butcher this, but the Clear Lake Capital, Bedad Agravali and Jose Feliciano. Those are the two that tried to buy the 40% from off Snyder, and Snyder blocked that. And then there was a lawsuit by the co-owners, like trying to force Snyder to take that deal a couple years ago, and that ended up NFL basically. It led to a lawsuit and NFL investigation that was basically shut down once they approved the debt waiver and allowed Snyder to buy out the three co-owners for around $900 million, and that was largely financed through Bank of America.
Do you think that in retrospect, looking back, do you think Snyder had thoughts of selling when he bought the minority shares? Like, was that part of the end goal, do you think, when he did that to make the whole thing easier?
That he said no. Well, yes and no. He got, look at 40% of $7 billion. What would that be? About $2.83 billion. He bought it for $900 million. He already made money off that.
Right.
I mean, the fact that this is why minority ownership is not always the best investment. It doesn't appreciate like the rest of the team. You don't have the power. You don't have really any say on the team, and you also don't get full value of the entire team. That's why that's why the Greek owners wanted Snyder to sell years ago, because they would have made a lot more money.
Right.
Until having to sell that chunk. So that's why being a minority owner is that's why I don't see, even if it's one of the intentions that Snyder had in saying what he did, and as I guess and Tanya earlier this week about exploring options. But that option is not going to be the most, that option, especially given the investigations and such, that's not going to be he's probably not going to find a partner in that.
Is there a route to where Dan works in with whoever the new buyer is, that he gets to keep, say, 20%? I've seen floated around to give to his son. You think a new owner would be willing to do that? How often does that happen?
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't know how often that happens. I'll have to do some research on that, but yeah, that could mean, as long as, like I said, with it, if you're a minority owner and you don't have, and you don't have, a say in things, I think that would be palatable. I think it's still preferable for the other owners to get him fully out. But if that's what it takes, they're going to pretty much they're going to do anything to kind of move on from this. They still have to worry about the John Gruden lawsuit, about the leaked emails, even after this. So there's kind of like how they got the St. Louis lawsuit off their plate, and and I wasn't actually officially off their plate until last month when the Kroenke agreed to pay back a good chunk of that settlement.
The other thing that we're hearing a lot right now is, we'll get a new owner and then they'll change the name again. We're back to everybody hates the Commanders. My understanding is the worldwide Commanders has actually done fairly well. Let's just assume that it was an average name, which I think it probably is. Would a new owner have the right to do that? Like a guy like Bezos, could he come in and just spend the money that it would take to buy all the Commander stuff back from Nike and whatever it takes and move on? One, can he do it? And two, would he do it?
Yeah, I think I've heard somewhere there was a three-year rule for a rebrand. So, which would actually would make sense. I don't think it would not. I don't think it'd be done immediately from the people I talk to, because a rebrand would, if it happens, would happen when the new stadium when the first year of the new stadium.
Yep. Okay.
Entering a new stadium would likely that where teams ramp up, and they ramp up with free agency. They ramp up with hiring the best coaches, best GMs. I'm not saying I also don't think we're going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of this with the new owner. I think we're going to see a lot of the same. I'm not sure about the coaching staff, but I'm hearing that they're likely going to keep on a lot of the Jason Wright and Mayhew and the others. They're going to I think they're going to keep them on for at least for maybe indefinitely. But I don't think you're not going to see because Snyder has made some positive change in the organization. And I don't think blowing it up when you first get there is gonna, as we've seen what freaking Musk is doing right now with Twitter, is always the best option.
Where do you think the new stadium ends up?
I still think RFK. There's a chance with RFK, but I think it's going to take they're going to have to figure out the affordable housing issue there, because the plan has been the DC Council and others have been fighting to make that into a more affordable housing, which the district needs. So they would have to either work that into the RFK site, which would be very difficult. But you're only talking 9 weekends out of the year. I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of way to do it that wouldn't disrupt people too much. But they would probably more likely have to find another spot in DC. So the owner would have to figure out another plot of land to offset the use of the RFK site for a football stadium.
When do you think is the soonest time that the team gets sold?
6 months minimum, I'm thinking, and I'm hearing from people that Snyder is going to be taking his time with this. He's going to be going, if he does decide to sell the entire team or even part of the team, he's going to be going around the country talking to people, or people are be coming to him, talking to him, and he's going to be I think Dan likes to be. I've heard he likes to be wined and dined, and he likes to be close to people, influential people. So I think, and these names we've seen are pretty influential. So I think he's going to take his time with this, and the only thing it can go quicker if one of these investigations drops, or if somehow there's some criminal charges, which we don't even know if that's even in the cards at this point. There's no proof. There's no information that I have that's happening. But we don't know. I mean, if one of these investigations, or even Mary Jo White's investigation, shows some very, very awful things, that could actually speed this up.
What do you think that the team ends up selling for?
I would say, I think you said $7 billion. If it was in that range, I would not be shocked. I think the other thing you have to keep in mind, Bezos, he does have a big house here in DC. He does, obviously, he's no longer a CEO of Amazon. He was the founder, and Amazon does have a pretty big and growing HQ, third headquarters, whatever you want to term it, in Arlington, and he owns the Washington Post. So, but the Seahawks are the next team everybody expects to go on sale. Would he more likely, if this doesn't work out, or if he doesn't want to deal with this team or Dan Snyder, would he wait and go after the Seahawks? Because he does want an NFL team, and it's been an open secret for years. But whether it's going to be, I think DC has a much more prestigious franchise than the Seahawks. Even the Seahawks have had much more success over the last couple of decades. But you have a chance to rebuild a fan base. It's a project. It's going to be it's an expensive project, because you're going to spend, I said $10 billion total between the team and a new stadium. It could be that or more. And it's going to take, when you're someone like Bezos, who has all that money, It's gonna, you could still make this a lot more profitable and a lot more higher value of a franchise with if he fixes some of the things that Snyder hasn't over the last 23 years.
Because that's kind of the thing that's like the last thing that I think people worry about is be careful what you ask for. A new owner comes in and moves the team. But the fact is the NFL knows that DC is a sleeping giant, right? I mean, they don't not want to be in the district. I think that's part of the problem that they dislike Dan so much is because they see what he's done to the franchise, right? So again, moving the franchise probably is not happening either, right? For those.
Oh God, no. That would be something. That would be the NFL would rather stand and keep the team than move. I mean that it's not going to happen. I mean, it's just because this is the nation's capital. I mean, it's just that's it. It's been mired by controversy, mired by bad draft choices, bad free agent signings, bad coach hires. It's been bad. Having his involvement with player personnel has been an issue. Especially early in his tenure as owner. I just don't, the NFL would never, ever, ever let it happen. There's zero interest in that.
Stuart, you got anything else? Did I miss anything?
No, there's only 32 of these, right? Yeah. And, you said something earlier. In fact, I thought when he bought this team, wasn't the Redskins one of the most profitable organizations in just sports, let alone football? Yeah. I mean, just sports.
Oh yeah,
right.
Oh yeah. That's why it went for so much money. It was around $800 million. Right. I've seen 750, 850 mentioned. A team didn't sell for that for many years after because you're buying. That team went for so much. It was a record at the time. Because of all not only the history, but because of what this was a huge NFL market. It still is, but it was so much bigger. And there was it's one of those things you buy where you'd have, even with all the mistakes he's had, look how much it's appreciated. I mean, that's because, the rising tide lifts all boats. Other franchises went for a lot of money. But we see how bad it's been run, and yet it still could go for, $7 billion. That's just, and it
will.
So that's pretty amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's
most
likely, at least.
And the crazy thing is he's depreciated it to the degree that it actually has exponential room for growth in value. Way more than like a Seahawks. Way more than like a Denver Broncos who just got sold. So this is a valuable mission.
Yeah. A historic franchise like the Commanders does not come on the market very often. Other teams do. We've seen the Panthers, seen the Broncos. The Broncos have a great history too. But we still even go back to the Ravens, and obviously they've kind of them moving. It's been a while too. A couple decades ago, moving into Baltimore. So they're but that they almost had to start fresh. So again, because even though it was a long-time NFL team under the Browns, and they had to start kind of fresh with the Ravens, and then they got the new ownership, and that's when they really took off. I think that's what they're looking for. The next owner is probably gonna has a lot of upside.
All right, so you're telling me that you're telling me, the naysaying fan here, that are you saying that in your mind this thing is going to get sold, and maybe as soon as 6 months, maybe a bit longer? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. Well, if you read I had a story up a couple hours ago that I was working on all of yesterday. Put up a scenario where he goes through the motions, asks for some huge amount of money. Let's say $10 billion. No one takes it. Then he's like, Snyder's like, well, no one wanted to pay what I wanted to pay. I'm keeping it. And there's always options. There's always things that could fall. This is, and you expect the unexpected sometimes with this ownership. So you never know. But I still think, from people I've talked to, everybody, as someone told me right after, one of my sources, you can't unring the spell. You can't go back. You can't just all of a sudden, and a minority owner, if you can find one's not going to fix it. It's not going to, you need someone new in here, mostly because beyond the investigations and all the awful allegations that former employees, especially female employees, have laid out there over the years, Snyder's PR, and how do you turn this around? And being a minority and bringing in someone, as a minority ownership in a minority ownership role. And is not going to fix that. You need someone new at the top. Just the whole PR perspective. It's like these fans don't want to give, a lot of them don't want to deal with Snyder, have stayed away because of it.
Last one. It feels like when he kind of threatened the other owners that it was a turning point in this. I'll never forget when Irsay makes those comments. Like nobody else said, that guy's a jerk and he doesn't speak for us, right? I mean, nobody did that. And I thought, whoa, like this, do you think that that's what really pushed him in that direction? Or will we find out that one of these, lawsuits, investigations is getting ready to explode on him and he kind of already knew that? What do you think is the real genesis for why this team ends up getting sold?
Yeah, you can't discount and I was right next to Irsay when he said it, and I was like, that was huge. I've heard the same from owners, but we anonymously, which I've used in my stories, we've all, USA Today has heard the same thing. The Washington Post over the, even going back, almost like 10 months ago with Mike Florio, reporting that before the Super Bowl. This is not new. Irsay said it out loud and put his name on it. That did, and it's nothing that we didn't already know as reporters who covered this, but it was such a big deal. And I think, like I said, that probably has a part in it. There's a lot of other things, the investigations possibly dropping, and the fact that he's, maybe he's just done fighting. There's a lot out there that, he just kind of, maybe he's just finally figured out that he can't save this.
AJ, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's one of these things. We had planned on having you come on a couple of weeks ago, and you had to take a trip. And sometimes you stumble upwards. That we were able to wait and get you on really what is the biggest day in franchise history since he bought the team.
Could be. I mean, I haven't made this joke yet, but I think I was going to put a poll up on Twitter. What would be the biggest celebration? The Nats winning the World Series, the Caps winning the Cup, or I was there for when Bin Laden was killed and the announcement of that and how happy DC and the celebrations that happened. What would be the bigger parade if Snyder does end up selling all of it? The fans have been waiting for this for a long time. If that goes down,
I saw it.
I hope Bowser does a parade.
I said JP Finley's already got the parade route mapped out.
I saw that. I saw that.
You can find him on Twitter at by AJ Perez. Again, but I really appreciate the time today.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. All right, here we go. For those of you that were listening to the first segment with AJ Perez, a ton of great information in there. Now we will get to the Preview Friday portion of the show. To do that, brought in a couple of good ones. Ryan Fowler from the Draft Network and host of the Commanding the Huddle podcast. Ryan, first time on the show. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, Doug. Appreciate it.
And one of my favorites, and been on a bunch of times now, Brendan Darr, formerly with 106.7 and the Team 980, now over at SiriusXM Fantasy and 4for4 Football. Brendan, how are you, buddy?
Doing great, Doug. Excited to be back, especially under better circumstances than last time.
That's right. It has been doom and gloom for a while. It's the team is still only at 500, even though they're on a win streak, which feels great. But I got to tell you right now that winning on the field is the last of my concerns, although we'll get there. Brendan, it feels like this thing is real. Are you excited?
I'm allowing myself to be excited. I wasn't over the summer when all the new information was coming out. Even as the summer went on and more things came out, I still didn't allow myself to get too excited. I believe I said on radio I had a 10% chance of ever being excited. And now I am, if I had to put a number on it, I'd put like 90. I am that excited. I can't even, it's all I've talked about with friends. It's all I've talked about with family. Like everybody is excited about it.
Now, Ryan, you covered the team for a while. You're off to the Draft Network now. How did you end up over there with those guys?
Well, I was with Washington, like you said. Started there back in 2018, and was working under Larry Michael at the time and kind of experienced, life in between the walls, if you will, of Ashburn. And like Brendan was saying, I mean, it's for a lot of fans out there, it's huge. It's been a huge week. And that Forbes report that came out this week is absolutely massive. It's been long news coming for a long time for a lot of people, associated with that franchise. I'm not going to get too into the logistics as far as my experiences with the team, but just with the Draft Network, I joined there in 2020 and having the wide range of not just covering Washington, but be able to cover, college football and the draft, and then obviously covering every 32, NFL teams. It's been a great experience so far.
Brendan, we're at the halfway point. They're 500. Is this where you expected them to be? Like, where are you football wise on the Commanders at this point?
I mean, I didn't think they'd be 500 right now. I was fairly certain after the first 4 weeks we'd be sitting here and they'd be 2-6. Like I was not expecting 4-4. It's a pretty big accomplishment to get here. Now, obviously, the two teams they beat were pretty bad in the Bears, and it took some luck to beat them with a muff punt. And it took Aaron Rodgers being historically inept for his baseline to get here, but they're here. And 4-4 is no small accomplishment given where things were before the Wentz injury.
Ryan, the team historically under Ron Rivera, not just this team, but his previous team too, get off to slow starts. What do you account for that? Because it can't be fluky at this point because it's every year.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it a lot. This is year 3 of the Rivera experiment with Scott Turner and Jack Del Rio. And you look at it in 4-4, and I know 3 straight wins is a great thing to look at, but it's mediocrity, right? And the first 2 years with Ron Rivera were sub 500 campaigns. And it's great. Like we just talked about, you're winning 3 games. You've beaten 2 NFC North teams out of the last 3 weeks, and you potentially get a third this week to make it 4 straight. But sitting here at 4-4, just like Brendan said, they could have very easily be 2-6. They could very easily be 1-7, a couple, bounces here or there. And before the year, we looked at we thought they were going to beat Detroit. In week 2, we thought they were going to be better. I thought that they were going to be better than 4-4 at the start of the year with the talent they have on both sides of the ball, and in year 3. But I'm trying to take this 3-game win streak with a grain of salt, just because this is mediocrity. 500 football is mediocrity, and we've seen it far too long now in Washington.
Brendan, what is it with the slow starts? Do you have an idea of why it takes so long to get going with Ron?
No, I have no idea. And the thing that annoys me most is that most of the offseason is usually spent talking up the season. And then we get to training camp, and all of a sudden the positive reports stop. And whoa, let's slow down the brakes, okay? Who gave us high expectations? Ron, it was you. It's always been you. You're the one that said you were going to land a superstar quarterback. You're the one that said your team was ready for a Super Bowl run with the right quarterback. Like, you are the one that set these high expectations, and then you get 2 weeks into training camp, you see the team's okay or not great, and everything is, whoa, hey, let's not say we're good, and the season gets here, and here we are. Another slow start. I don't get it.
Ryan Sam 48 from the Post was on with me last week, says that when Wentz is ready to go, barring winning them all, it'll be his job to have back. Part of that is what Brendan alluded to, the coaching staff and thereby the GM being the same guy has been trying to get the quarterback right. You have to. It seems incredible to think they'll go back to Wentz, but both of them have something to prove, right? The head coach and the quarterback. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, there's kind of 2 paths that you follow if you're a franchise. You're either you got a franchise quarterback or you're looking for one, right? And unfortunately, Washington, the carousel has been turning since the late 90s, unfortunately for a longer time than that as well. But really since Mark Rippon left the building. But I find it hard to believe that if Taylor Heineke continues to win football games and the juice that he provides inside that locker room, it's going to be Carson Wentz's job, just giving it to him just because he's healthy. I think we know that momentum is a scary thing in sports. And we've seen Washington go on late runs in the season before. And we've seen Taylor Heineke win big ball games. And if he's out there and he's not a world beater by any means, he's not one of those tier 1 dynamic athletes at quarterback. I think we understand he offers a little bit more from a dual threat perspective under center that allows Scott Turner to be even more creative from a horizontal perspective on offense. But this is something to where if Taylor Heineke continues to win football games, how can you sit the guy? And it's been very similar with what we saw in Dallas with Cooper Rush and Dak Prescott. And, it's just going to be an interesting storyline to follow for sure. But if number 4 continues to win football games and Ron Rivera, wants to be in DC next year, same with Scott Turner, I wouldn't be surprised if Taylor rides this thing out for the rest of the year.
As Fred Davis said on Monday, and he said there's no better way to lose the locker room than to
Right.
yank a guy
Yeah.
that the whole team loves
Yeah.
to put another guy back in. But Ron will say, listen, it's a brand new offense for Wentz. It's a brand new language. It's, the last 2 offenses that Wentz has been in were both similar offenses, basically from the same creator. That's what the company line will be, Brendan, as far as why Wentz needs to get back in the game, because he didn't have enough time in the offense. What say you on that?
He had 6 games, and he looked terrible in most of them. I mean, sorry to cite another website, Ryan, but PFF had him as one of the bottom 10 quarterbacks in the league. Now, Taylor Heineke, I believe, is a bottom 5 quarterback if you take out snap restrictions. He grades out terribly. He hasn't played well. I mean, the offense had 120 yards until the final 2 drives
They're
last
still
week.
only averaging 17 points a game.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like things are looking pretty. It's just that the defense has gotten better, and not substantially better, just better enough to score 17 points and win. That said, you cannot go back to Carson Wentz. Under no circumstances can you go back to Carson Wentz. And that's not even taking into account the fact that if he hits 70% of snaps, it'll be a 2nd-round pick instead of a 3rd-round pick. You just can't go back to that guy. He stinks. And while Taylor Heineke also stinks, at least the guys like to play for him. It's
Love
not
to
like
play
this.
for him.
Yeah, it's not like these wishy-washy comments about he's our quarterback. It's everything on social media has to do with Taylor Heineke. Every comment the guys make has to do with Taylor Heineke.
Yeah.
They love that guy.
Yeah.
Where the other option there is I think is easy to see. Everybody kind of knows what you already get with Heineke. We've seen that movie already. Ryan, the other option is to get Sam Howell in and see what he's got. Where did you have Howell ranked coming into the draft? I know he kind of took a step back as far as valuation went last year, but getting Howell in with enough time to kind of let defensive coordinators to me, that's the biggest thing. If you're going to put Howell in this year at all, put him in with enough time that defensive coordinators can game plan him for him after some tapes out. Your thoughts on Howell and where you had him in the draft rankings?
Yeah, he was a late day 2 guy for me. I know we saw him go in the 5th round, and just studying him, he was an easy evaluation that COVID year when he had De'Ami Brown and Javonte Williams and Michael Carter and Daz Newsome on the outside. That was an easy evaluation. But then you look at last year, and North Carolina's offensive line was a complete turnstile. You turn on that game against Pitt, against Kenny Pickett, in the rain at Pittsburgh, and he's completely battling his tail off. We saw a little bit of that in the preseason. But for right now, to sit here and say, we're just going to throw in Sam Howell to see, throw him to the wolves and throw him in the fire, I don't think that's the best plan of action right now. Is he someone that maybe down the road may have something? For sure. I think he's a very talented kid. I think he's someone that has all the arm talent in the world, very easy gas from that perspective. Is someone in the class that, from an arm talent perspective, was one of the top quarterbacks in the class, probably behind Malik Willis from Liberty, that we now Tennessee Titans. So for right now, I'm not going to jump and say, Sam Howell's the guy we need to put in the game or whatever. Taylor Heineke is still the guy that needs to carry this offense, if you will. Nothing's great that Brendan talks about. He's not the most talented kid in the world at all. But from a Sam Howell perspective, now this is something to where, we expected him to be on the sidelines most of the time this year, holding a clipboard in street clothes. Now he's behind Taylor Heineke. He's 1 snap away. So as we've seen, nothing is out of the question as far as Sam Howell being 1 play away from being in there. And who knows what can happen? Who knows? In DC, we understand that over the years, who knows what can happen when a quarterback comes into play. And Sam Howell, for me, was a quarterback that I thought was underdrafted. I thought Washington got a heck of amount of value taking him in the 5th round. And he's got a lot of talent for however long he is in DC, and if he ever gets that opportunity to be that QB1 here.
Brendan, it feels like they're finally using Gibson the way we all kind of expected that they'd use him. again, it frustrates me, and they're on a win streak. I hate to be down on the team, but it feels like they're forced into doing the right thing all the time, right? Like they wanted a pounder back and a scat back type guy. Well, they didn't have all of that, so they made Gibson do it for the last 2 years and let McKissick have the role that he has. Now that they've got Brian Robinson, it feels like they finally get Gibson back into basically the McKissick role. Why do they always get forced into doing the right thing?
Man, I don't know. It's weird how the receiver in college looks better in space in the NFL rather than running between the tackles. I know we're all shocked by that. I don't know, man. Like, there are a lot of things I don't get about Ron Rivera, Scott Turner, the game plan, especially like prioritizing J.D. McKissick, bringing him back when you already had a better version of J.D. McKissick and Antonio Gibson. And it sounds like from all indications, they were planning on taking a running back in the draft, no matter what, not just because Brian Robinson fell. That was air quotes for the people that can't see. He didn't fall, by the way. I don't get it. It's always been, he's been a home run hitter and he can do things that other running backs can't do. Like, other running backs on the roster can't do.
Sure.
And using him as the between the tackles grinder was just mismanagement, I guess is the best word for it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And now that he's back in like the lead dog role a little bit, you're seeing what he can do. Like, he can catch passes out of the backfield. They can line him up out wide, and he can also catch passes. He can also get out in space. Like, it feels like they haven't taken advantage of what he does best and tried to fit this circle into a square and just try to turn him into an actual running back, a 3-down back. And maybe that's just not him.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it can be.
It could be, yeah.
All 3 downs feels like more to do with, your ability to block than anything else. We know he can catch the ball. Ryan, he's due for a contract. Where do you sit on the idea of giving running backs second contracts?
Look, we'll see with AG. Brendan talked about a lot about it, just him in space and him not being that in-between tackles grinder. And it's tough because you watch him at Memphis, and there's 3 Memphis backs in the NFC East with Gainwell and obviously Pollard and Dallas. Very similar backs. It doesn't matter how big they are or how tough they are. They're very similar as far as their skill sets. With another contract, I mean, it was unfortunate, obviously, the situation with Brian Robinson, but he's their RB1 moving forward. And we saw how much other teams coveted a guy like J.D. McKissick. J.D. was almost a Buffalo Bill before Washington kind of upped their offer and brought him back into D.C. It remains to be seen how successful in the snaps that Antonio has the rest of this year to where, you give another contract. Because at the end of the day, I don't see Washington in this year's draft taking another running back. I don't see that in the plans, even though it is an extremely deep and talented pool of backs coming out this year. Antonio Gibson was someone that we were extremely high on just a few years ago. We've seen that dynamic ability.
Yeah. He's
shown the ability at times to be that 3-down back because he has a physical profile and the ability to create in space. We've seen that a ton. But the easiest way to find yourself holding a clipboard in the NFL is what? Putting the ball on the ground. Yeah. We saw that with Matt Jones years ago. Oh, dynamic talent, big body out of Florida. Put the ball on the ground. It doesn't matter if you're playing Pee Wee or playing the NFL. You can't hold on the ball. You're not going to be playing the NFL long. So Antonio Gibson is still in the doghouse, I think, for Ron Rivera. And I just don't see him back and really in the immediate future plans. I don't see him getting another contract in Washington, in my opinion.
Well, not just that, but philosophically, when's the last time a second contract worked out? I mean, maybe Dalvin Cook on the team that we'll see Sunday, but it does not happen very often.
Right.
And that's why, and I think that's why, you just end up drafting them. The other one that is interesting, the guy that's coming up for a contract, and Brendan, this is hilarious to me because we had this same conversation like a year ago when you were on it. It's Deron Payne time. And, I don't think either one of us thought that he'd ever be on the team and get a big contract after they gave it to Jonathan Allen. He's having one of those years that's going to make it hard for the team not to pay him. I know people are talking about Sweat, and I'll be curious to get both of your opinions on this, but the money for Bradley Chubb was huge that just came out. I mean, if that's what you're paying Montez Sweat, maybe you do just pay Deron Payne the $17.5 million or whatever it is that gets him really close to Jonathan Allen, and save the 22 that you have to pay an edge rusher, and then just draft the edge rusher. I didn't think that was the way things were going to work out, but after seeing that contract, I don't know which way is the better way to go. What thoughts on that, Brendan?
Well, let me ask you guys something. How much stock are you putting into this year with Daron Payne versus what you've seen so far in his career from Daron Payne?
It should make you pause at least a second. It's tough for guys that perform their best in a contract year, right?
Right.
Yeah.
He drafted Fedarian Mathis for a reason too.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I would be hesitant to give him the contract mostly because of what I've seen up until this year. He was clearly behind Jonathan Allen, and you would always prioritize the pass rushers. Now, it's not like Montez Sweat was necessarily the best pass rusher in the league. He's also not been great like we all expected.
Another guy that's played well in a contract year, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm a little scared about letting him go, obviously, and I do wonder if things had kind of fallen apart, and let's say they're 2-6 at the deadline. Do they try to move him? Right. I don't know. I get the feeling that they probably wouldn't have and just try to stick it out and make a playoff push like always. So the fact that they ended up winning the 2 games before the deadline and kind of answered that question for them, I don't know. I'm on the fence about paying him, but it's not like I'm going to be upset if they do.
Ryan, what are your thoughts there? Just, I guess, from a team building aspect that's the biggest way. Like, where do you put your assets?
Yeah, it's an interesting, narrative to kind of, it's tough. I mean, Daron's playing his tail off right now, but it's just, you have to kind of look over the past years. It's a league that's, what have you done for me lately? And Daron Payne's been good, and Montez Sweat, hell, I mean, he's been one of the top pass rushers from a pressure's perspective, the entire NFC the last few weeks. He's been a man possessed, but this is something that we wanted to see from day one out of Mississippi State, not 4 years later.
That's right.
This is someone that you're supposed to be from day one. And unfortunately, we've seen it without Chase Young on the opposite side, and they were expected to be this dynamic duo at the edge. But you talked about drafting guys. They drafted Shaka Toney, James Smith-Williams, William Bradley King. I know those are late day 3 guys, but those are depth guys. Then rotationally, and you can never have enough pass rushers. So if they opt to pay a guy like Payne and let Sweat walk, these are guys that we've seen rotationally. Casey Tuhill, F.A. Obata working behind on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage. These are guys that obviously they have trust in if they don't want to pay Montez Sweat at the end of the day.
The defense has been fascinating to me, Ryan. I'm curious your thoughts because they fire Sam Mills in training camp, which almost never happens. A position coach getting fired that late into or that early into the season, however which way you want to look at it. But the results speak for themselves. Can it really be that simple as Sam Mills just wasn't getting the production? Like, he wasn't coaching them properly? I guess I don't know enough about coaching to know the effect that a guy could have like that, because it feels obvious. You can see it.
Yeah, I know that, everyone, Ryan Kerrigan in the building, is obviously a guy that players love, sometimes play like Chase Young talked about the other day, play with him, and now he's coaching him. A lot of that I feel like sometimes with Jack Del Rio and Sam Mills kind of butting heads on different philosophy things within the interior, what they want to do, where they want to align guys, how they want to stunt in certain situations. A lot of that stuff goes into it behind the scenes. Because I think guys like John Allen, a leader in the locker room, a guy that obviously, shows his play on game day, and then is a guy that guys rally around inside that locker room. But overall, defensively, a tip of the cap to Jack Del Rio these last few weeks. But this week is going to be huge, especially at the second level. And I know we haven't talked about it yet, and I don't know how much is going to be used this week with TJ Hawkinson. But he doesn't know all the intricate details of Kevin O'Connell's playbook. But if you need him to run 7-yard digs here and there, before you know it, you're going to look at the half, and you could have 70 yards and a touchdown. And you're facing guys like DeJon Harris. And I'm not going to sit here and praise David Mayo ever, but from a depth perspective, he understood what Jack Del Rio wanted to do defensively. And now it's just Damon Davis and probably going to be DeJon Harris and probably Derek Forrest and Percy Butler, hopefully rolling down in the box some, playing that Landon Collins Buffalo nickel role, if you will. So I tip of the cap to Jack Del Rio the last few weeks, but this is going to be a huge test for Washington for sure this week, especially at the second level.
a huge test tonight. It's funny you brought that up. We do an opposition Wednesday every week, and Ben Lieber, who's the sideline reporter for the Vikings, was on and said, expect there to be, a handful of third down plays and goal line plays for Hockenson. To me, Brendan, the biggest problem will be when they move Jefferson into the slot and it's Wild Goose time. Wild Goose been all right, but I don't want him facing Justin Jefferson in the slot all day. Sounds like there'll be no David Mayo. There'll be no Holcomb again. I mean, I like all the safeties they got, but Ryan's right. This is going to be a true test of the defense this week.
Yeah, this Wild Goose is about to get cooked, unfortunately.
Score one for you.
Sorry. Oh, God, that was so bad. Dad jokes, right? Justin Jefferson against anyone in the secondary is a mismatch for Justin Jefferson. Even if Hockenson only sees work in third downs and red zone, I mean, he's still obviously a pretty big threat. I think people forget just how good he was just because the Detroit offense wasn't that great. Like, yeah, they put up points here and there, but Hockenson has shown that he can be a real threat. We just have to look back and see that he put up, I believe it was the 6th highest fantasy point game tight end, or by a tight end of all time, when he had like 48 points a couple weeks back. He can be that guy. Now, he's not going to be that guy in this offense simply because Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook are there. But I mean, when you have to say that you have Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook to worry about, and also TJ Hockenson, Jack Del Rio has his work cut out.
And Adam Thielen.
Yeah, and Adam Thielen too.
Who was kind of the forgotten man in that offense. Brenda, are you surprised that the line smells funny?
I'm not surprised.
Like 3.5, right?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by any line anymore. I feel like everything has gone to hell in a handbasket this year as far as betting.
Yeah.
So seeing a line like that, yeah, it's a little weird. I would have thought the Vikings probably would have been favored by 4.5, 5.
I thought maybe even 5.5.
Yeah. So, 3.5 is a little strange, but it still wouldn't stop me from placing a legal wager on the Vikings.
Yeah, it seems odd. Ryan, where are you with the play in the back end of the defense? I mean, they moved St. Juice outside, and to my eye, he looks pretty good out there for a guy that hasn't had a whole lot of time doing it at the NFL level. Another move they were forced to make that I think a lot of people thought was the right move all along. He was never a slot corner. He needs the boundary for the help there to be able to press a little bit more. They are pressing a little bit more with him out there, which they should have always been doing. Yeah. Feels like Fuller is regressing a little bit to my eye. And then the safeties, that's where they make their hay, right, is with the safeties in the back end. Derek Forrest, to me, looks really good. I still think they could use an upgrade over McCain, but as long as he's not getting burnt every week, that's fine, right? Where are you with that group back there?
Yeah, with St. Juice, we watch him at Minnesota. He's a long-armed corner, nearly 33-inch arms that plays on the outside.
Yeah.
Why did it take this long to move him outside? It's not hard to see, and he's had some success. Watch that Philly game. I don't care that A.J. Brown big-boyed him and carried him in the end zone. A lot of success against Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. He's a second-year guy that barely played last year because of concussion issues. It comes with snaps. And I'm excited to see what Benjamin St. Juice and how he grows on the outside. Now, Kendall Fuller, hopefully moving forward in the future, I don't ever have to see Kendall Fuller in a burgundy and gold uniform again. I can't stand watching Kendall Fuller, watching that all 22 every week and seeing 29 turning and running and chasing receivers. But Cam Curl has progressed into one of the top safeties in the entire NFL. He's been absolutely outstanding. I get it with McCain, but he's that veteran on the back end that, again, understands the optics of playing the safety position in the NFL. He wasn't good in Miami either, but he's someone that is cheap, and that's someone that understands, again, how to play the position where in the future, hopefully it's going to be Derek Forrest and it's going to be Percy Butler's positions to play. So that's a spot that Washington's deep in. But, I like at the corners room where they're very, very light as far as depth. Fuller, Wild Gooses, these guys aren't going to be here in the future. But St. Juice is someone that I'm positive on. I love his skill set. I love his length. He's physical. He's not afraid to stick his face in the mud in the run game. I like what Benjamin St. Juice has been able to do.
Do they have another natural single high type free safety on the roster. That's another move that always kind of surprised me. I thought they brought in McCain because of his quote unquote position flex. And they just used, I mean, he was the nickel at Miami, if I recall, most of the time. Again, he's been fine as the free safety. I'm just curious, do they have, like, if he's not going to be back next year, do you see a natural free safety on the roster?
Well, it's tough to play single high in the NFL. Very, very tough. And a lot like that, we talk about Kyle Hamilton, how the alien that he was coming out and playing single high at Notre Dame. He hasn't played that in Baltimore yet. Hasn't done that at all. You know, he's been a guy that's come in on sub packages and played in the dime packages for Baltimore. But Cam Curl is the only guy that I can look to be that single high. We saw Percy Butler do a little bit at Louisiana, and his range is outstanding. But he's a guy right now that we've seen a lot on special teams. But Doug, single high, as we know, is extremely tough to play in the NFL. And you got to have guys on the outside. You're playing single high and you're sending 5 or 6. You got to have guys on the outside that can cover. And if it's not St. Juice, like this week, Brendan talked about it, Jefferson against anybody arguably in the NFL is a mismatch. So even just this week, you're not probably going to see too much single high. But if there's one guy in this roster that can play it, it's Cam Curl for sure.
Brendan, Kirk comes back to town. How do you think the reception will be for Cousins this Sunday? You still got a lot of love in the district. You know that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think like it'll just be a muted reception. I don't really think like people are going to sway too hard one way or the other. Like on one hand, he's like the best quarterback the team had in the last decade, and on the other half really didn't even want him to start. So it'll probably be a 50-50 split. I can't imagine it'll be too heavy of a boo, but who knows?
Ryan, if the Commanders pull it off on Sunday, how do they do it?
Limiting Dalvin Cook, and you got to try to limit Justin Jefferson. You're not going to stop him. So keep him out of the end zone. That's the best thing. Try to that bend or break defense. It's the best thing you got to do is just limit those two. You know, they're going to try to pound the ball, open up play action for Kirk Cousins. We know that Kevin O'Connell likes to run. Kirk Cousins, we saw him in DC. Play action. Open up middle of the field, take your shot plays. So just try to limit as much as you can. It's easier said than done, but limiting the run game and keeping Justin Jefferson out of the end zone for sure.
Brendan, I know most of what you do now is fantasy. Who do you like? Give us some guys you like to play this week.
Well, unfortunately for the Commanders, it's going to be a lot on the Vikings side. The Vikings are getting to face the 28th pass defense against DVOA. They're 28th in yards allowed by the Commanders. So pretty much either Adam Thielen or Justin Jefferson, if you have them. On the Commander side, the one guy I really like is Terry McLaurin. He's the most consistent player in the offense when Taylor Heineke's under center. And we've seen that he's been unlocked with Heineke back. The matchup isn't great. I believe the Packers are 22nd DVOA and 26th in yards allowed per pass attempt. So it's not like it's a tough matchup. Heineke should be able to at least find him, hopefully 7 or 8 times. But it's, it's Jefferson, Thielen, Cook, and McLaurin are the 4 guys I really like in this matchup. No surprise.
And Samuel, right? You're not big. I mean, he's been cooking recently.
If he continues to get 4 or 5 carries, I'd feel a lot more confident in him. The problem is a lot of those carries could also just go to Gibson or J.D. McKissick. So, I like the way that they've been creatively trying to get him back involved in the offense after there was like 3 or 4 weeks there where it felt like he really wasn't part of it. He's a good flex play if you have him. It's not like I would go out of my way to start him, but with 6 teams on bye this week, anything's possible. And hard decisions got to be made.
No doubt, but some of my teams look terrible this week.
Yeah.
Ryan, what is your expectation for the team going forward this season?
Yeah, I think they'll play well moving forward. They're going to have to. I think they're going to be juiced up to play for Ron Rivera. Obviously, more tragedy for him this weweek with his family, unfortunately. It's been through a lot. It just stinks. It's just more, negatives around this football team. But when you're winning in between the hashes and you're having success, you start to believe in yourself. You start to believe in those 53 guys in the locker room. I think they'll play well moving forward. I know they got a big game next week, Monday night in Philadelphia. That was supposed to be Carson Wentz's homecoming. We're going to see Heineke there. So hopefully that could be a potential game where we saw Philly struggle a little bit with Houston last night. It's not easy to win games in the NFL. Everyone's in the NFL for a reason. Everyone's getting a paycheck in their locker Monday morning. So I think they'll play well moving forward. I really do.
What is let's wrap with some score predictions. Ryan, what do you think?
I'll go 24-20 Vikings. I think Kirk will sling it around a little bit, but if Washington's able to pressure him, he's not dynamic, like I said earlier. Not dynamic outside of structure. So I think I'll go 24-20 Vikings, and hopefully it's a close game and ball, bounce either way and see what happens. But I'll go 24-20.
Brendan, what do you think?
I'm going to say Vikings 31-24. I don't have a ton of faith in Washington's ability to win this game. A lot of the things the last few weeks that led to a 3-game winning streak were basically coming down to the fact that they faced Sam Ehlinger. They barely beat him. They faced a terrible Green Bay Packers team for the first time in what feels like 3 decades, and they barely beat him. And it took really a muffed punt in that Chicago game to turn the game around, and it was ugly. The last 3 games have been ugly. I think if they can't slow down the Vikings offense, things could get away from them. And we know Taylor Heineke does not do well when he's on the back foot and he's got to throw 40, 45 times a game. If he's got to do that, that's a recipe for disaster. So I think they can keep it close, but I'm not confident they can win.
They got to get the run game going, and they've got to be able to continue getting home with 4. I mean, that's the dream, right? If a defensive coordinator can drop everybody else and only rush 4, that's a huge key to success, because Kirk will throw them away now. We know that. Got to get home and pressure him to do that. Brendan, you writing still articles for the 4 for 4 football? Sorry, that didn't get out very well.
Yep, I do a weekly rankings breakdown of all of our rankings and projections over at 4for4.com. You can hear me on Sirius Fantasy XM on Football Diehards Mondays and Thursdays from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. And then I also work a bunch of other shows throughout the week for the channel.
And Ryan, when does the podcast drop for you each week?
Yeah, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get it. Commanding the Huddle.
Sounds great. Fellas, I appreciate the time today. Always have a good time when Brendan, when you come on, and Ryan, was great to finally get you on the show.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys.
Thank you so much, Doug.
All right, fellas. Thanks.